Welcome to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
At EPLA, we seek to support women and families suffering early pregnancy loss by providing resources, education, and community. It is our vision that no one suffers miscarriage alone.
Welcome back to Hope Blooms. I'm Maria Servold, EPLA's president, and we have with us Emily Carrington, our executive director. And today we're going to just go over some medical terminology concerning early pregnancy loss. We haven't talked about this for a while, and we've, since our founding, thought it's important to have clear definitions and understandings about what is happening with pregnancy loss.
Yes, I think it's good. There's a lot of words that when I had my first loss, I did not know and did not understand. And like you said, from the beginning, raising awareness and increasing education is a priority. So we have some other awesome episodes on this. I'll direct you back to them and put in the links where we've sat and talked with doctors and nurses and had medical professionals sort of expound and dig into some of these things. But today we thought we would do sort of a Miscarriage 101 refresher based on our resources that we provide women in our kits and to doctors' offices. These were put together with the help of doctors and nurses. So we're going to be a couple of moms reading some definitions and trying to help you understand. And maybe you can always find these on our website too. I will put a link to miscarriagecare.com/resources.
Yeah, and the little brochure, it's a handy little, I'm holding it up even though no one can see it, little trifold brochure, which we first started as like an informational sheet, like a regular sized piece of paper. And that, I remember that focus group we had in 2016, it was like one of the very first things we wanted to do was provide some sort of just, printed information that we could give to women, because in my own situation, it felt like no one told me. Even if they told me what was happening, it didn't make sense or I couldn't remember, And so that was one of our first things was we need to give people information about what's happening. And so that's been a consistent thing from our founding.
Yes. So knowledge is power. Bear with us. This is going to be, I think, full and rich with information. But we're going to come at you with a lot of information. And if you want our brochures or any of the information, contact us.
Yep.
We want to get it out there. If you're like me who can read better than I can listen, then go to our website, request the brochures. But I don't think we can say this stuff too much.
Yep. And we'd love to send these to clinics and doctors' offices and things so they can hand them out. But
information, we are going to give it to you all here, not hold any back. Information is free. Maria, do you want to go first? First, I got these up too, but miscarriage. What is a miscarriage?
Well, and this I think is one of the most important things we can say. It's sometimes called a spontaneous abortion, and that is a triggering phrase, but it's the natural death of an embryo or baby before he or she can survive outside the mother, which usually we refer to miscarriage as 20 weeks or earlier. After that, it's often called a stillbirth. And I just read an article recently about how they can now, as early as 22 weeks, they can save babies, for sure, 24, which is incredible. But, and typically a lot of the people that we're helping, it's, fewer than 12 weeks often, but
yeah. And I think, like you said, I think it is really important for women to know that it is sometimes called a spontaneous abortion. I have talked to a lot of women who have been either hurt or confused, all across the board. This is my point on this is not anything other than just spontaneous abortion. Abortion meaning that the pregnancy stopped. Spontaneous meaning that it stopped spontaneously.
On its own without you doing anything.
These are not in one direction or another. It is just what happened. And miscarriage is sort of our vernacular word for it. And some women I've heard too, we use the word, also we use the word early pregnancy loss.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any good words for a thing that is bad.
Yeah.
And so miscarriage, I know, bothers some women because it feels like they made the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Spontaneous abortion can sound like they made a decision, even though they didn't. And pregnancy loss is good, but also like takes away, I think, from like the baby's death.
Right.
So I'm just going to come out here and say there's no good word to explain babies dying in their mother's
Yep.
or uterus.
Yep.
I do want to say too here, we think it's really important to use words in our resources that are consistent with the medical community.
Mm-hmm.
So we do talk about the death of an embryo or fetus. We also will say baby,
Mm-hmm.
but that identifying the scientific gestational life does not take away from the humanness of that life.
Mm-hmm.
So we affirm that life starts at the beginning of conception. And so we use the language embryo and fetus, and we use the language spontaneous abortion because I think it's important for women to understand those medical terms that might be flying at them, even if they feel cold or distant or
the term used, the term that I heard when I was in the ER was products of conception. So that's another one.
That's another one you might hear.
Yeah.
So just understanding those, there's no good way to describe this.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes this is what we have. And I think it's important that we are clear in what that means. So yeah, when we say miscarriage, pre-20 weeks, spontaneous, so the death occurred for natural causes.
Yep.
So we'll get into some of the ways miscarriage can happen, but for most, and we can listen to some of the other episodes go into this, spontaneous really isn't a bad word for it.
Right. Yeah.
It is, we often don't know. Sometimes testing can reveal, but the death of the baby has already occurred. And so, so let's move on. I'll read this next one, missed miscarriage, because I'm going to start talking about it if I don't just move forward. A missed miscarriage, and this is my first miscarriage, was a missed miscarriage, and I didn't know it was possible. And it's important right here, the missed is not that the doctor missed it, the missed is that my body missed it.
Right.
So that a missed miscarriage, also called a missed abortion, is an early pregnancy loss in which the baby has died but has not been expelled from the uterus. When a missed miscarriage occurs, 3 options are available: to induce labor, to expel the baby, to have a dilation and curettage procedure, or to wait until the baby recognizes the miscarriage and goes into labor on its own. We will get into those definitions here in a minute, but that means that when the ultrasound has occurred, the doctor cannot find a heartbeat, or a fetal pole is the other word for that. A little blinky, flashy sign that you see in your ultrasounds. So when I had my missed miscarriage, we had a heartbeat at 6 weeks, and then at 11 weeks, there was no heartbeat. The baby had already died. It's like checking the vitals. So we knew that the baby had died, and then from there, you have decisions about how to move forward. And we can talk about those in a minute when we get to those definitions. Yeah. So that is a missed miscarriage or missed abortion.
Right. As opposed to, sort of the spontaneous kind, which I guess, maybe, that refers to all miscarriage. But like in my experience, I just started bleeding out of nowhere. Right. So that was not a missed miscarriage. It was just a miscarriage, and my body recognized and began to, expel the baby on its own. So both are not great.
So, miscarriage is more about the time you discover the death than the time your body expels the baby, and your body can hang on for a while.
Yeah.
So All right, Maria, ectopic pregnancy.
Yes, an ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy in which the fertilized egg has implanted outside the uterus, usually in the fallopian tube. And this implantation is not compatible with continuing the pregnancy. And if this happens to you, you might have pain, cramping, bleeding, and ectopic pregnancies do require surgical intervention because the baby can't grow in the fallopian tube, and they sometimes have to remove the fallopian tube in order to deal with it, or it can be damaged. So, yeah, and that's a sad situation because it's like it could be growing, but then you'd know something is wrong, I suppose, by the pain and symptoms you're experiencing. Or they go look for it in ultrasound and see that it's not in the uterus. Yeah.
Yes, ectopic pregnancies can be very scary.
Mm-hmm.
And we provide resources as well. And again, this is where we think these words are important because early pregnancy loss and miscarriage are, like I said, sort of vernacular words to describe any type of loss pre-20 weeks. So now we're getting into different types of loss. So there's the ectopic pregnancy. Then there's a molar pregnancy. And molar pregnancies are a little difficult. I'm going to read the definition we have, and we'll go for this. This is the definition we have on molar pregnancies. A molar pregnancy is the implantation of an unfertilized egg. The unfertilized egg has some genetic material, but not all. And while the cells often reproduce, the cells do not differentiate. The mass or mole, sometimes called a hydatidiform mole, is not and will not be a baby. However, a molar pregnancy mimics symptoms of pregnancy and can produce very high levels of HCG, which is the hormone produced by the placenta after implantation. Often, mothers feel the symptoms of pregnancy and have positive pregnancy tests and a uterus larger than the expected gestation. So this is sort of, I don't want to expound on this too much because of my own limitations, but the body is moving forward, but something has happened, and baby, there's not a necessarily, it's the implantation of an unfertilized egg. So like everything moving forward except the production of life,
right?
Of a fertilized egg. These are the one thing I do want to say about molar pregnancies is that your grief is valid. Your grief is valid. Everything seems to be moving forward. Every expectation, if you had a positive pregnancy test, like if you're feeling nauseous, if you're feeling all of those things are real. And your grief after a molar pregnancy is absolutely valid. And yes, that's all I'll say. Yeah. Chemical pregnancy.
Yes. Okay. Chemical pregnancies, I think, are rather common, maybe more than we realize. A chemical pregnancy occurs when a fertilized egg never fully implants in the uterus, but sometimes a very sensitive pregnancy test taken early can show positive for pregnancy. But then a woman discovers she's not pregnant when no pregnancy can be seen on ultrasound or menstruation begins. And I remember seeing once a great video from a labor and delivery nurse who this happened to. And so she explained it really well. And it's like if you do the pregnancy test fairly early and you catch a positive, but then even like before your expected period, but then a period arrives as planned, right? So that's sort of what's happening here. It's like there is a fertilized egg, but it never fully implants. But if you happen to take a test at the right time, you might, see that it exists, but it hasn't implanted and therefore won't be able to survive.
Well, and scientific testing, right? All of the advancements we've had allows us to know and see in ways our grandmothers and mothers didn't get to have, like, crazy early pregnancy tests.
Right.
And so there's some understanding here, right? We know some things our grandmas didn't know.
Yeah.
Early miscarriage. An early miscarriage is a loss that occurs in the first trimester before the 13th week of pregnancy. Most miscarriages occur as an early miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
A late miscarriage, Maria?
Yeah. A late miscarriage is a loss that occurs in the second trimester between the 30th and 20th weeks. Second trimester loss before 20 weeks is still considered a miscarriage, even though you're in the second trimester. And we've discussed with
later.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, this is a later loss in that second trimester. They're not as common,
mm-hmm.
And they still likely would happen though in labor and delivery.
Yeah, I was going to say there's different medical professionals we've talked to in different hospitals do this differently, like where they'll treat you depending on how far along, or some places will just always take you to labor and delivery. Some won't, but that often is determined by how many weeks of gestation.
Well, and I want to say something too about the weeks gestation. Even though early miscarriage is everything before 13, the experience between a 4-week pregnancy loss and a 12-week pregnancy loss could vary greatly.
Mm-hmm.
So realize that there's different experiences and different physical experiences, and we're going to start talking about. I wanted to get through those ends so we can talk about the medical care and sort of the experience of miscarriage, because as you move towards even a later early loss, even though that might not happen in a labor and delivery unit, you're going to have a different experience than like a chemical pregnancy loss.
Right.
So we said with a miscarriage that there were 3 choices. And now we're going to talk about those 3 choices that a woman has, or theoretically choices. Sometimes circumstances dictate that one of these is either a better choice or you don't get time to make it.
Right. Well, so that was exactly what happened to me. I just had spontaneous bleeding, and then, that lasted for, I don't even remember, a handful of days. And I'd been to the ER and stuff, but did not have any sort of medical procedure or intervention except confirmation of the loss by ultrasound. But then 10 days later, I started spontaneously bleeding again very heavily. So then I went to the ER again and had to have what I'll define here. The next thing we have is what is called a D&C, short for dilation and curettage, because I had there was still something in there attached and bleeding, part of the placenta or something. So they had to go in. I didn't really have a choice. They had to go in there and make sure it was all removed. So let me just read that definition. So a dilation and curettage, or usually called a D&C, is a procedure in which the cervix is chemically or mechanically dilated, and a tool or vacuum is used to remove the remaining tissues following a miscarriage or missed miscarriage. This is usually done under anesthetics or sedatives. Mothers can experience vaginal bleeding, cramping, and mild to moderate pain after a D&C. And I'll say, I was under general anesthesia. And actually, I didn't have that. The pain afterward was quite mild. So certainly less scary and bad than... Yeah, I did too. I mean, because beforehand I was like, passing these huge clots, and it was terrifying. So, as sad as it was to have to like go back and deal with it more, it then allowed me to start healing. So
I want to reiterate too, a D&C is a procedure used for a spontaneous or elective abortion. In the case of spontaneous abortion, this is performed after the baby has died. So it is a common procedure. We both just talked about ours, and we both had them in different circumstances. Where though Maria's had started spontaneously, she still needed a D&C. And mine was a missed miscarriage, so I elected to do a D&C, but the baby had already died. And the D&C seems like the best way forward for both of us. So this can be surgery can feel scary. The word can feel scary. And it is a procedure used for both spontaneous and elective abortion. So I just want to make that part clear. And also, as we're talking about that, medications. Sometimes medications may be given to help the woman's uterus pass the baby. If it's an incomplete miscarriage, that's a word we didn't really define, but that would be if the miscarriage, if there's still tissue remaining in the body. And so those medications, which again can be used in both spontaneous and elective abortions, death has already occurred. And that is when those medications are given for a miscarriage.
Right. And sometimes women will be prescribed some of those medications and then go home expecting, waiting to miscarry at home once the medication starts doing its job, which is what our large kits are for.
Yes. Yeah. If you know that it is one way to sort of manage the process as much as you can. It's hard to manage.
Right.
Natural miscarriage.
Yes. Do you want me to read that one?
I'm going to read that one.
A natural miscarriage is an option chosen by the provider or the mother to allow the body to expel the embryo or fetus naturally. This can take from 2 to 6 weeks. Mothers can experience heavy bleeding, cramping, mild to moderate pain, and incomplete passage of all the tissues, including retained placenta. Often women experience a natural miscarriage before fetal demise is depicted via ultrasound technology. Yeah, which is what happened to me. So it's like I didn't choose.
This is everything we've been explaining.
Yeah, I didn't choose to wait. I didn't even know. It just happened on its own. I don't think I'd even had any appointments or ultrasounds or anything yet. So right. I thought I was pregnant, but then all of a sudden it was clear that I wasn't. But also this can apply to you've seen the ultrasound. There's no heartbeat, and then you're just waiting to naturally miscarry at home. Which is what you did once, right?
Which I did with my second miscarriage.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we developed, our large kits for, was to have women be prepared for what's going to happen at home. Because no one is prepared for how that's going to be.
Yes, so those large kits, if you know, either the moment you start bleeding or the moment the doctor diagnoses a reach out and ask for a kit. And that's what those in your hand. Medical care for ectopic pregnancy. Maria already said some of this, but I will read it from our document. Most ectopic pregnancies require surgical intervention. After surgery, mothers will require rest, mild pain medications, and emotional support. An increase in vaginal bleeding should be reported to your doctor. If an ectopic pregnancy has caused the rupture of the fallopian tube, a mother can experience severe abdominal pain, vaginal bleeding, and shock. This is considered an emergency, and treatment may require additional days at the hospital. Do not mess around with ectopic pregnancies. Work closely with your doctor, and your doctor will move forward with what needs to be done. These are unfortunate. They're difficult. They're difficult to grieve, and with the ectopic pregnancy. And your doctor will see. So let's talk here. We talked a bit about this, but I want to make sure we discuss the medical care following pregnancy loss and your physical needs, because I had a DNC on a Friday and went back to work on a Monday, completely unaware of what's going to happen. So, vaginal bleeding. Maria, can you read this one?
Yes. Okay. As with any delivery, vaginal bleeding is to be expected following a miscarriage. They can last anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks. An increase in vaginal bleeding can be a cause for concern and should be reported to the provider. Yeah, as happened with me. I thought I was done, thought I was out of the woods, and then all of a sudden I was at work and it was like, I need to go to the hospital again. So, and no one, I think they had told me when I first left the hospital, monitor how much you're bleeding. If it's a lot, let us know, which is like, okay, that's vague. But then it did decrease, it lessened over, a couple days to a week maybe, but then by 10 days after the initial loss started, it was like all of a sudden again, which I didn't expect at all. And it was terrifying. I was like, what's happening to me? And my husband was in another town that day. And so I drove myself to the ER, and it was rather traumatic.
The vaginal bleeding is not always a heavy period.
Yes, that's, you're going to hear that a lot. Like, it'll be like a heavy period. And as Emily can attest to, can be more like labor.
Yes, which leads to the next definition, pain. Mild to moderate pain can be expected. Cramping is common as the uterus contracts to return to its original size. Supportive measures like ice, a heating pad, warm baths, mild painkillers if it's appropriate, if your doctor thinks that that's appropriate, can be helpful. After my first natural miscarriage, it wasn't until I had the birth of my baby that I realized that miscarriage was more like labor than it was like a period.
Right.
And I think that is so important. And again, why we do what we do.
Right. Well, and so to even refer to it as like a period diminishes the life, the death aspect. It's like, no, it's labor because it's a baby that's coming out, It's not a period, which is no baby. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And our last definition we're going to tackle today is, I told you, we were going to pack this thing full of medical information.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You can do the last one.
Yeah. So postpartum infection, which, that word postpartum, we always think of that meaning when you've, gone to term and then had a baby, but it's still postpartum even with a miscarriage. An infection following a pregnancy is a very serious complication and can be fatal. It's important to not use any tampons or douches and abstain from sexual intercourse until vaginal bleeding has stopped. Any change in discharge or fever should be reported immediately. So this, and I think most providers would alert you to this as a problem, as a potential problem, but just like any other birth, it's something to watch out for. And I think emphasizes the importance of the seriousness of resting and, not rushing back to things until you're healing or healed, because it's a serious thing and it's not nothing. You don't want to act like, oh, I'll be fine tomorrow, because you may not.
Right. This is where proper care for you and your body is a huge priority following loss.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think all of this is information I did not have.
Yeah.
So
me too.
You stayed with us, and it was a good refresher for me too. If you hung tight with us here, congratulations. Please share this information and explaining where we got our information. Again, this is not to diagnose you. This is work with your doctor. This is always our disclaimer. We are not prescribing, treating. We're not trying to do medical science here, but we truly believe that the knowledge is power, and the more information we have as women and families, the more we are able to experience things together. And unfortunately, the nitty gritty reality is partly what we need to know to help each other, to bear each other's burdens, to build one another up, to grieve and understand what it is we've lost. So digging into some of this medical science. And again, we have some podcasts that dig deeper. If you liked this, let us know, and we can even dig deeper, and we will do in a future episode, stay tuned, some more of the emotional and spiritual care following early pregnancy loss. So thank you all so much for listening and bearing with us through this. Maybe this was totally your cup of tea, and I keep apologizing. There are definitely science nerds out there, and I enjoyed it and enjoyed reviewing this. So I think this is just powerful information. So thank you, Maria.
Yes.
And thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
To learn more about how we and you can support women suffering early pregnancy loss, visit our website at miscarriagecare.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for listening.